so grateful to be with you all. My name is Elias Deleault. This is my wife, Rachel. We are part of the paid staff ministry here in Tacoma, Washington. So we're just about 45 minutes south of Seattle, and we've been here for about 6 years. We've been working with singles and leading a small region here, and we love it. We love the opportunity to work with singles on any level. We were both reached out to and made disciples by singles in the singles ministry, and both in the Los Angeles area at the time. And so we just have always really believed that singles can become Christians, want to become Christians, will become Christians, and we'll make other Christians. And we really don't. We get why Jesus chose mostly single people out of the 12 to train, because singles are so capable and willing to be equipped to go and fulfill this Great Commission. So we're grateful that you're here. We're assuming on some level that you like evangelism or feel convicted that you need to like evangelism or want to like evangelism on some level. And whether you like it or not, I think we all can agree that it's something we're called to do. And so we're grateful to be able to talk about that. It is obviously a unique scenario that we're in a pandemic, a global pandemic, to try to continue on in this great commission. We here in Washington have been in some form of lockdown or stay home order for about 5 months now. And so that has had a great effect on our ministry. Now, luckily, nobody here in our fellowship has actually come down with COVID-19, but it still has affected our church rhythm and how we do church and everything else. And so Rachel's going to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, just thinking back to when it all started, I feel like everything kind of went on hold after when the pandemic first started. I feel like we were all just trying to grasp what this global pandemic impact was going to be. And like Elias said, church definitely changed. The way that we connect with people, the way that we reach out, the way that we invite people. Some of us probably haven't met with our church for months. So maybe we haven't seen our guests in a really long time or invited anybody to anything, because really, like, where there hasn't been a place to invite anybody to. Sorry. And I know for many of us, Zoom has provided a really great opportunity and a space to make some of these things happen. But I don't know that everybody's so comfortable joining a Zoom with a group of people that they don't know. And aside from that, I feel like the pandemic has had even deeper effects. Like, it's affected the way that we've kind of internalized what was going on. I feel like in the beginning, there was kind of like a self-focus, like a shift to focus on us, on ourselves, and how we were processing this experience and what it meant, you know, like whether we were fearful or hopeful, whether we were feeling faith at all during the onset of all of this. And I mean, makes sense. I think life for many of us got flipped on its head, right? And then the way that we relate to people, I feel, was really affected because all of a sudden we were almost forced into withdrawing and asked to kind of like eliminate seeing people, you know, like we kind of had to set up a barrier. So obviously that affects evangelism. It's radically affected the way that ICOC evangelizes, which has always been so people oriented and reach out. And so I don't know, so maybe today you're here because you're recognizing, yeah, my focus from the Great Commission has shifted a little. Or maybe you're just feeling challenged because given the current circumstances, you don't really know what to do. Even when you do meet people, because it's not exactly kosher to just strike up a conversation at the grocery store when we're supposed to be avoiding each other. And yet, you know, people are getting baptized. Like, we're hearing about people studying the Bible. You're probably seeing it in your own ministry. And maybe you're feeling like, hey, I want to get in on the action again. I want to, like, you know, answer the call of Jesus telling us to go make disciples. I'm wondering, you know, it's probably, you know, like undoubtedly why you guys are here with us today. And Elias is going to explain a little bit more.
Yeah, we, you know, I just heard a story this week from a brother in Orlando who was reached out to. He's your brother now, but he was reached out to by a coworker in his office somewhere in April or so. So, kind of early on, but still when things were heightening in the pandemic and the church wasn't really meeting in the same way. And he studied the Bible. He did all virtual Bible studies through Zoom or FaceTime or something else. And he got baptized, and he's your brother in Christ now. And yet he's never actually been to a quote unquote church experience like we would know it. Like he's never been to a Sunday service or a midweek or a Bible talk in that way. And yet he was able to study the Bible and become a Christian and get baptized. Also in South Carolina, there was a young man who was there on a work visa and just about to go back home to his country in Africa. And when the pandemic hit, obviously he couldn't go. And he had been to church a couple times, but hadn't really, gotten into studying the Bible or anything. Pandemic hit. He started to feel this need. And actually the church was meeting virtually, and there was more opportunity for him to meet because of that virtual space. And he started meeting with the church twice a week to do Bible studies, the disciples there. And he became a Christian. He gets baptized, and God opened the door for him to actually stay in the U.S. and continue to be here and be with the church. And he's doing extremely well. So we hear these stories in our ministry. We just had one of our teens get baptized this week. People are getting baptized. People are still making Jesus Lord. I think the question for all of us is how is this happening? And we may or may not tackle how really today. I think what we're more concerned with is why. And a lot of you guys on the screen, you may have seen this idea before. Simon Sinek, who is a business consultant and author, he kind of coined this idea of the golden circle. And really what it is starting with the why you do something really is the most important thing in trying to produce anything. And he talks about it more in the business model, but it goes for really anything in our lives, that if we want to see something produced, we have to really start with why we want to see that produced. Because the why will inform how we go about doing it, and what will be produced from how we do it. But if we start with the what and we go, okay, I want to produce this, but we don't really have a good enough reason why, oftentimes we run into challenges or complications or nuances that we're not comfortable with, and we don't really figure it out because our reason why isn't really bedrocked in a good enough reason for us to persevere or to figure out how. And so that's really what we want to talk about today is why continue to try to make disciples, and what does it look like to have the right reason why. And so we're going to look at a familiar story in Matthew 14. This is not a passage on evangelism, but it is a story of Jesus, I think, illustrating how he trained the disciples to reorient their reason why they were doing things, and therefore how they did things and what was produced. So in Matthew 14, and I'm going to pull it up here because my screen just froze on this one. Matthew 14, 13 through 21. Oh, I got it back just as you pulled it up. All right. It says, and this is Jesus. He's been preaching and teaching. If you know the story, he's just heard about his cousin John, the Baptist, being beheaded, and he goes to try to withdraw, and it doesn't work, and the crowds are following him. And in verse 13 it reads, when Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat to a solitary place. Hearing this, the crowds followed him on foot from the towns. When Jesus landed and saw such a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. As evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, this is a remote place and it's already late. Send the crowds away so that they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food. Jesus replied, they do not need to go away. You give them something to eat. We have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, they answered. Bring them here to me, he said, and he directed the people to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves, and he gave them to his disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. The number of those who ate was about 5,000 men, besides women and children. And so what happens here, right? The disciples have a thing that they want to get figured out. They want to solve this problem. What they need to do is they want to get the hungry people fed. And so this is what they want to produce. How are they going to do that? The disciples are like really pragmatic about it. And honestly, it was a pretty good solution. Like they're being, sensitive to people's needs, and they've got a very realistic way of approaching the need at hand. They go, hey, let's send the people away. They can go into the town, go find a restaurant or a grocery store or something, or whatever it was, a market in those days, and get some food, and they'll be taken care of. So their why was, hey, people are hungry. How do we meet that need? We're going to send them away, and what will be produced? They will eat, and they'll be satisfied, and we'll all get a break, right? But Jesus, who was this master rabbi in their lives and in our lives, was really training them as his apprentices to think like him and to do what he did. And no moment was left unintentional for Jesus when it came to training these guys. And this was one of those moments. And he used this opportunity to really show them God's ability to give people what they need through miraculous forms. And what was the reason, for Jesus not sending them away? I think that was probably a big question in the disciples' minds. Like, these people are hungry. Why won't you send them away to go get some food? Well, for Jesus, he started with a different why. It wasn't just, hey, people are hungry and we need to get them fed. His why was, I have compassion on these people, and I want to see God move in their lives, and I want them to feel a manifestation, an actual experience with God here and now. And so he started with this why of, man, I love God, and I feel compassion for these people, and I want them to experience. How was he going to do that? He just said, hey, what do you have? He was going to use what was available to him. What do you have? Well, we've got a few loaves of bread and a few fish. And he goes, okay, bring it to me. And he takes what he had, what was available to him, and he brings it to God, and he prays, and he gives thanks. And what is produced? This miracle is produced, right? And these people are fed. And so Jesus, he starts with a bigger why than just people need to get fed. He started with just compassion and love for people and wanting to see them experience God's power and mercy in their lives. And that transformed how he went about approaching this need and what was eventually produced. And what was produced was, man, the people's faith were increased. Can you imagine all these people like seeing this bread just kind of, I don't even know what it looked like, but it just kept coming out, right? And what that would have done for their faith, and what it did for the faith of the disciples there, of the 12 that he was training. This was what Jesus was after producing, a miracle that people would experience. And so it's so important that we start with the right why. Why are we going to try to reach out in a pandemic? Why are we going to still try to, forward the Great Commission when we're social distancing? Why is so important? And I know you're going to share a little bit about getting to the right why.
So I'm a why asker. I ask why about most everything. And I know that oftentimes it can drive my husband crazy, but the reason that I always ask why are twofold. One, I really detest futility. I really don't like working towards something and exerting my energy over something that is or seems pointless or doesn't have a meaning. But secondly, and most important for me, I really believe that God is also interested in my why. I feel like he really cares about the motives in my heart behind the things that I do. And I know that I will never please him by merely doing anything. So whether it's evangelizing, seeking the lost, making disciples, like however you want to call it, it's really important that our why is in the right place, or that we have the right why. a couple of weeks into the pandemic, I don't know, maybe even a week and a half, I started hearing about people studying the Bible via Zoom. And I started hearing about baptisms. And quite frankly, I started to feel a little envious and a little insecure because I hadn't even thought about my pre-pandemic guests, nor was I thinking up ways to reach out. So I started praying through my thoughts. And I quickly realized that my whys weren't really aligned with God's whys. You know, like a lot of it just had to do with like my own glory. It's what I felt I should be doing. I'm on staff. It's definitely what I thought I needed to be doing. But when your why isn't aligned with God's, it can feel, okay, when your why is aligned with God, I think it does give you a sense of peace. Mm-hmm. It's inspiring. Mm-hmm. It's satisfying. When it's not, it can produce quite the opposite. And I found myself feeling a little burdened by the task. I felt really challenged because of my circumstances. I was confined at home, and I was really anxious that I wouldn't produce. And I just kept thinking of how can I like, I don't know, how can I get studies? How can I like start reaching out to people? And I put out a couple of posts on Facebook, like drumming up business is really what I was trying to do. And it wasn't giving me the peace or the satisfaction or the inspiration because it wasn't God's why. And so I just kept praying through it. You know, I remember one day I was sitting in my living room looking out my window. I could see my neighbors' houses, and I was just thinking about the neighbors that I'd met, the ones that I'd reached out to, the ones that had come over to our house. And I started thinking, not just like, I wonder what they're doing, but I started asking, like, I wonder how they're doing right now. Like, everybody's shut in. We're not supposed to be talking to one another, seeing each other. And I reasoned with God that what I really needed to do is that my heart needed to change. And I needed to get a heart of compassion for what they were really needing. And as I continued to pray about it, I started praying every day, like, God, lead me to somebody who's open. Like, God, help me find somebody to study the Bible with me. My why really changed. It really wasn't about, oh, look at me, I'm studying the Bible during the pandemic, or who am I going to baptize when this is all said and done? I started to really feel excited about giving to people something that I knew that I had that most people don't. And the miraculous thing was that I didn't even have to worry about the how. Like, this couple literally fell in our laps. They called us desperate for somebody to study the Bible with them. They'd gotten our numbers from somebody from a different state. A couple of days later, I was talking to my friend's mom, and I feel like God just compelled me to ask her to study the Bible, even though I had about a year ago and maybe like 6 months before that. And she told me no each time. And this time she must have just been ready because she said, yeah. And I don't know, it was just really faith building. And I think what motivated me at first was, how can I encourage people? Like, not so much who can I study with? And the kids and I would get in the van and drive around town and give little gifts and little notes. They would paint rocks. We'd drop them off at neighbors' houses. It was like God's Spirit, as he reset my why, was really inspiring me to want to give to people. And there was no anxiety. Like, I don't feel like it's a means to an end. If nobody ends up becoming a Christian at the end of this, of getting baptized, I feel satisfied with what I'm doing, because I know between God and me, it's more about me wanting to give to them, offer something to them.
Yeah, it is amazing. We both committed to, like, let's just pray every day. With our small group, we were praying every day for different things. And on our prayer list was to meet somebody and study the Bible with them. That was on our kind of our top 10 big prayers that we were going to pray for this period of time. And over that time, God just started opening up doors. I studied the Bible a little bit with a neighbor, a single guy I got connected with through one of the sisters, and studied with him a little bit. And we've been studying with this couple, and it wasn't because, we were out there knocking on doors or doing something. It was just God moved and opened up doors. And I've experienced, and I don't know about you, but I had always experienced that when I really want to study the Bible with somebody, if I just start praying about it and asking God and getting my heart aligned with his reasons why for his heart of compassion towards the broken world, people just start coming, and they just start popping up, right? The miracle just starts happening. And I don't have to worry about how I'm going to make it happen so much. The how really is just kind of, it gets solved. And I think that's what's so important here. We could do a class today about the top 100 ways of how to make a disciple in a pandemic. We would have to make up that 100 ways because we don't know it, right? But we could do something like that. But it doesn't guarantee that somebody will become a disciple just because we give you the canned answer or the functional answer of how. And it doesn't mean that anybody's faith, including yours, will increase, that you'll see God and you'll see a miracle. The truth is, people are becoming disciples in many different ways. Some of them are being reached out to at work. Some of them are being reached out through social media. Some of them are being reached out through, a gift or a hospitality or something that is a need that is met in their neighborhood. There are all kinds of ways of how people are becoming disciples. I think when we really get our why right, the how will solve itself. We'll figure it out. And what will happen is God will be glorified. Miracles will happen. In 2 Corinthians 5, in verse 14, Paul says, "For Christ's love compels us, because we're convinced that one died for all, and therefore all died. And he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and was raised again." And this is just a great example of getting the right why behind what you're doing. And when we get that really aligned with God, things just happen. And we plant seeds, but God makes it grow. All the miraculous work is on God's shoulders, and he does it. But we've got to really make sure that we have the right why. So as we land the plane here, and then we're going to have a little bit of time of discussion, Q&A, we'll do our best with that. But as we land the plane, I just think it's so important to take this time right now to get your why right. Why do you want to make a Christian? Why do you want to help somebody find salvation in the lordship of Jesus and in his grace and mercy provided through the cross? Why, really? And the cool thing about this whole pandemic in some ways is that it's given us all a moment of pause to sift through some of those motives, to be refined by God's Spirit of why we're doing the things that we're doing, why stay connected to the church, why continue to seek out discipling relationships, why continue to have your own quiet times and strive for spiritual formation, why try to help somebody else become a Christian. It's such a great opportunity to sift through these motives and to really discover one that is aligned with God's why and just watch what happens. And then I think the other thing is just begin to pray for miracles daily, for God to give you somebody to study the Bible with, that God wants you to be used to help make somebody else a disciple. I mean, that's without a doubt, right? We all know that. I think oftentimes we just got to go to God in prayer. We've got to be the persistent widow. We've got to beg God to transform our hearts so that it starts from within us and not just behavior modification, but that it really starts from a transformation of within us, that his Spirit does this transforming work of helping us see people the way he sees people. And we've got to pray for that every day and pray for God to open doors. And then I think just do what you can with what you have and leave the results to God. This is what Jesus did. I mean, he just goes, hey, I know why I want to do this because I have compassion on these people. What's available? A couple of fish, a couple of pieces of bread, and then he just takes what he has, he presents it to God, he prays over it, and God does the miracle. And I really think that's the goal here, is for God to do these miracles, not for us to go out and be the top salesman and produce. Right. God is not looking for producers. What he's really looking for is people who are willing to be filled with faith and aligned with his vision, and he'll do the rest of the work. We are in a broken world, and we are in a world that is really hurting right now, more so than ever. And people are trying to figure out why continue, why keep going, why have hope for the future. And as disciples of Jesus, we have the real the right reason of why they should keep going, why they should have faith, why life is so important, why we can have security in things far beyond material means or economies doing well or not, or even our own health, going up and down, why we can have a greater hope because of Jesus. And people need the why that you have in your faith. And so let's learn from Jesus. Let's make sure that we start with the right why, so that we can figure out how, and you'll figure it out. I think if you're really compelled by Christ's love, you'll figure out how to reach out to people. You'll figure out how to get aligned with to get God to do a miracle. You'll figure it out, and what will be produced is miracles. So thank you guys. Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know how intimidating this whole social media thing is. I know for me it was, and I didn't want to learn Zoom. I didn't know how to use it. I was completely zoomed out, like very quickly after the pandemic started. And yet that's my main avenue for studying the Bible. I had one of the women that I'm studying with she wouldn't even put her face in the camera. She hated Zoom so much. But just to Elias's point, whatever is at hand, we're using, and God will multiply, and it's pretty incredible.
Yeah. So thank you guys for hearing us and for being with us. We do have some time, and we'd love to open it up to any questions you might have. We might have answers. I don't know. Maybe we will. Maybe we won't. But you can throw a question in the chat, and we'll do our best to try to answer those. And then we thought maybe after that time of questioning, we could use a little bit of time just to hear from each other about ways that you're seeing God move in this time, and ways that people are becoming Christians that are unique and special, and how God's moving. So
and there are some questions on here that
maybe we're behind on.
Yeah. But so how do we let people in, or do we just answer from? Let's
answer from the chat first, and then we can have some people share. Okay, do you have a few hows that you've heard of that are useful during pandemic times? So that's one, and then we'll start with we'll go to that one after that. So do you have a few hows? Honestly, some of the things that I've heard really be helpful is engaging with whatever virtual thing you're doing online with your church. If it's streaming on your Facebook or streaming on the website, really engaging that, like sharing that, sending friends that link. It's surprising how many people are actually open to viewing church online right now. I think it put a little bit of a distance between that uncomfortable, going to a new group who I don't know, and there's kind of this buffer of that people don't have to see them or know that they're there necessarily, and so people are actually open, I think, a little bit more to hearing a message or seeing people who still have hope, and I think people are turning to that. So that's one way that I've heard people reaching out and making connections, is just sharing what's happening within their local ministries on whatever social platform they're on, and sharing that stuff virtually. I don't know if you have anything else that you've.
Well, I think hows. Elias has been a great example. We'll have FedEx come to the house, or we sold a couple of things on OfferUp, but he's really taken every opportunity. And I think it's because his heart is in that place. He's been praying that anybody that crosses his path, he reaches out to, he talks to about God. And I think when your heart is secure in, it's really not about producing, whether this person decides to respond positively or not, it's not up to me. Then I think it helps, right? Imagine it helps you. I know it helps me to be a little bit bolder, to share a little bit more. Anybody that crosses your path. Yeah, it is awkward to try to strike up a conversation when you're both masked at the grocery store. So that's not really where it's happening. But as I'm interacting with anybody that comes to the house, just taking those opportunities to extend an invite. I invited somebody today, and I said, hey, I want to invite you to church, but we only have it online right now. And it was it started a great spiritual conversation. So just taking those opportunities, I think, as well, when you do have a moment. Gregory Schramm asks, what helps you the most getting your heart aligned with God?
If you want to share any of that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, asking yourself why is very simple, but really profound, because it'll take you down. As however dark that hole is for you, it'll take you all the way down. You just keep asking yourself why. And then as you're reading your Bible, it's almost impossible to not be convicted if your why is not aligned with God, right? If there's any insecurity in there, if there's any like people pleasing, if there's any fear. I know sometimes we can feel fearful, like what are people going to think of us if we're not reaching out or we're not converting somebody? But those are not godly characteristics. Like, God doesn't want us to live in guilt or in fear. Definitely doesn't want us striving to please other people. So keep asking yourself. That's what I do a lot. Elias can attest to that. Like, I ask not just of others, but of myself. I ask why a lot. Well, why am I doing that? Well, because such and such. Well, what would that mean? And then I always look for it to line up in the Bible. Like, well, is that something that the Bible teaches? No. Okay, well, then I can cast that off me, because that's not something that God is calling me to. And if there's something in there that it is calling me to, and I'm feeling a tension, then I know that that's something that I need to spend more time in prayer and surrender to, so that God can get my heart into that. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. The only other thing I would say about how to get your heart aligned, I have found that if I can only give what I have, right? You can't give away what you don't possess. And if I don't possess a heart for people, like if I don't love people, I can't really, I can like, and I think there is a place for self-denial and obedience, and we need to do that. But I don't think the goal for Jesus was that we're just denying ourselves the rest of our lives to love people. I think the goal is that through the Holy Spirit, we're transforming over time to become people of love. And so for me, that's really led me on a journey of, you know, how do I transform from the inside out? That's what I'm really interested in, because I want to be authentic. I don't want to just, you know, deny myself all the time in everything I do. And so I think going down that journey with God, the spiritual formation practices and the spiritual disciplines, things like fasting and silence and solitude, and certainly study and the hospitality, just taking a journey down. How do I get more space with God's Spirit to transform me from the inside out? I found that to be so helpful. I think the other thing is just being careful of what we're allowing in. Because our world is really decreasing in empathy. And the messages that are coming across every platform is, if you don't think like me, you're, you know, something derogative, right? And empathy is just so low on the scale of importance in our world today. And so I think I've just got to be careful of what messages I let in, because I don't want to get aligned with an unempathetic worldview. I want to stay aligned with Jesus's worldview, and so I'm very careful about what do I let shape me spiritually, because spiritual formation happens whether it's from Jesus or whether it's from the world. You're going to be shaped into somebody. The question is, who are you becoming, really? And if you want to become someone who is more like Jesus, you got to get more space with God's Spirit. So that would be the other thing I would say. Okay, can you speak to some? This is Tanika Levy. Can you speak to some ways to make authentic connections beyond just sharing a link?
Yeah.
I'll just share one example real quick. Is I have a neighbor who I've had over a couple times, and I've kind of had my faith is like, we're going to study the Bible, and that's not where he's at, and it's been more of a like, I'm going to take it at the pace that this person's willing to go, and we've gone really slow. We're talking about a lot of spiritual stuff. He's bringing spiritual needs to me, but he's not really latched on to the idea. And I've thrown it out there a couple of times of studying the Bible, and I'm okay with that. It may take a long time, but I'm okay with keeping that connection going. A guy I reached out to today when he came by the house for something. he said, I'm an atheist, and I've been an atheist for 15 years, and it was a long process to go there. And I just went, man, I said, I'm really interested in that story. I'd love to hear your story. I'd love to hear how that process was for you. And I genuinely am. I'd love to make a connection with this guy just to hear that story. How did you arrive, at a 15-year process of becoming an atheist? He had been in the ministry in the past, he said. And so I think just taking a genuine interest in giving yourself time with people. Jesus was really good at being interrupted by people and giving them time. He didn't like have to move on to something else. He had time in his life to just be interrupted and to engage in an authentic conversation and connection with people. And I think that's one way. So